Thank you so much, Megan, and good morning, everyone. So across the world, conversations around musicians' health are gaining momentum. Institutions are beginning to listen. Networks are forming. Individuals are pushing boundaries. We are essentially seeing meaningful efforts to rethink what it means to support musicians. This is indeed encouraging. In the UK, for example, the Healthy Conservatoires Network is uniting institutions under a shared vision, namely one that makes health everyone's responsibility. Across Europe, the Association of European Conservatoires is tackling interconnected challenges such as equity, diversity, discrimination, and power. In the United States, the Health Promotion in Schools of Music project, led by Chris Chesky back in 2006, gave us the first formal recommendations to embed health into music schools through frameworks, courses, and access to care. These were indeed landmark steps. And in 2011, they have shaped new accreditation standards. Today, accredited music schools in the US are expected to inform students about injury prevention, as well as the maintenance of hearing, vocal, and musculoskeletal health. But let us pause here. Notice anything missing? Mental health is not mentioned in these health education standards, not once. It appears only under access to services, and even then, the burden of prevention, of staying well, falls squarely on the individual. We do see institutions developing their own programs, on-site counseling, physical therapy, online resources, and growing partnerships with external specialists. And increasingly, we see health education courses being introduced. These are promising developments. They form a growing base of knowledge and experience that we, as a field, can build upon. However, a major disconnect still remains. Despite decades of research and growing awareness, most institutions still lack a coordinated, long-term strategy for musicians' health. What we see instead are fragmented efforts, a one-off workshop, a lunchtime seminar, a flyer with a QR code quietly pinned to a notice board. These initiatives are often well-intentioned, but they rarely confront the deeper forces at play. The systems, the cultures, the pedagogies that silently shape how musicians experience stress, injury, or burnout. Even when standalone health courses are introduced, a welcome step, the content is highly variable. Some focus on anatomy, others on performance anxiety, nutrition, somatic approaches, or practice routines. Sometimes health is framed as physical, other times as psychological, occasionally both. And all too often, it is framed as personal, as something you must manage, monitor, and fix alone. And so the message becomes, if you're struggling, try harder. Be more resilient, be more disciplined, be more in control. Meanwhile, the very systems that produce this pressure, the traditions, the hierarchies, the silence around abuse remain unquestioned. Let's take one example. Warming up before practice. It's one of the most commonly recommended strategies for preventing injury. And yet, the evidence is mixed, at best. Still, we cling to it. Why? Maybe because it's practical, manageable, and at this point, familiar. It doesn't disrupt anything. But here's the truth. No amount of warming up will fix a toxic environment. It won't counter harmful teaching. It won't heal a chronic fear of imperfection. It won't challenge a system that rewards obedience, self-sacrifice, and burnout. We know from public health research that education alone doesn't change behavior. It takes a supportive ecosystem, one that's willing to look at power, policy, pedagogy, and purpose. And even then, we have to ask, do we even know which behaviors need changing and why? This brings us to something much deeper. What assumptions are we reinforcing when we talk about health? Too often, health is framed as a matter of resilience, or as a medical problem to be treated, or worse, as a sign of weakness. But where is the critical reflection? Where are the conversations about hierarchy, about tradition, about who gets to speak and who stays silent? When we teach students to regulate their bodies and minds without ever asking why the regulation is demanded or who benefits from it, we are not empowering them, we are silencing them. No matter how thoughtful a course might be, it cannot carry the burden of institutional transformation. If we are serious about health promotion, it must be woven into everything. Our hiring practices, our leadership structures, our definitions of success, our curriculum, and most of all, our culture and how we look at music. And let's be honest, there are still many things we don't know. We still lack clarity around what actually causes certain health outcomes in musicians. Much of our research still focuses on classical music, still prioritizes performance anxiety, still leans heavily on individual coping strategies. We need to go further. We need to look at working conditions, at power dynamics, at the absence of health access, the lack of critical thinking, the silence around toxic norms. These are not side issues, they are central. We need a research culture that resists oversimplification, that values uncertainty, that asks better questions, not just about bodies, but about systems. And we need to start communicating these unknowns, not as shortcomings, but as invitations to rethink, to question, to expand our understanding of what it truly means to care. And so all of this leads to a larger question. What is the purpose of tertiary music institutions today? Are we preparing students for a profession that no longer exists? Are we reinforcing outdated pathways or building new ones? Are we shaping freelancers or future leaders of the art form? Are we training technicians or critical thinkers, collaborators, and cultural citizens? Are we clinging to tradition as law or engaging with it as a conversation? Institutions cannot do everything, but they must choose. And if they don't, this is also a choice. Without a clear collective sense of purpose, tertiary music education risks becoming fragmented, irrelevant, and out of step with the world it claims to serve. So let's be clear, there has been progress. But progress is not the same as transformation. Without a shared vision, without institutional change and courage, without the willingness to question even our most cherished assumptions, health promotion in tertiary music education will remain surface level. If we want real change, we have to go deeper. We must ask, what do we assume about the art form itself? What do we expect of our students, and why? What do we really mean when we talk about health? And most importantly, what is health education for? Because the answers to these questions will shape not just what we teach, but who we become as a field. And with that, I'm delighted to hand over to my colleague, Julia, who will take us further into the philosophical foundations of health education and challenge us to reflect even more deeply on what it truly means to support well-being in music. Thank you so much for listening.